With that, I'd like to introduce the president and vice president of the New England Association of Recovery Court Professionals. And to avoid any problems, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Mr. President.
All right, my name is Robert Ziemian. Ziemian is my call sign when I was a Navy pilot. Retired now. I'm president, and I actually was part of the association in 1994 when we started this whole organization.
And you're a retired judge from Massachusetts, is that correct?
Right.
And Madam Vice President, I'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Tina Nadeau, and I'm the Chief Justice of the Superior Court in New Hampshire, and I've been on the board of the New England Association of Recovery Court Professionals for probably almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
And you're also on the board of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, now called All Rise.
Yes, I am on the board of All Rise. That's true.
All right. Now, I'd like you to start with you, and I'd like you to tell me something about yourself, Mr. President.
Okay, I started off in 1989 as a judge, and I went to Desert Storm. I came back from Desert Storm, and this is how I got involved. I had a probation officer that said Joe Blow, whatever his name was, tested positive 2 weeks ago, and he didn't. And he said, I said, well, what happened after that? He said, we never said anything. So I called the person who was the treatment, a great treatment center, and I asked to go there and show me the place. And the final thing I did was explain to him that you should give us more information. And he said, why didn't you? He said, do you want the truth? I said, of course I want the truth. He said, we don't trust the criminal justice system. Now this was in 1992. And I said, my God, so that's how I became that we had to cooperate better with the treatment community in order to make whatever we did in court more successful. And that's how I got involved in drug courts.
And how did you get involved in drug courts?
Well, I have been on the Superior Court since 1996, and at that time there was a pretty progressive judge in the county I sat who got a BJA grant to start a very small, then called drug court. And there was only one in New Hampshire, and I watched it grow, and I watched the participants do well, and I realized there are people that I see in my courtroom day in and day out, year in, year out, and we are not helping them change their behavior. So when I moved to another county, I got a group together to start a treatment court there. And then when I became chief, I convinced a couple of other county judges to apply for BJA grant money to start treatment courts there. And then in 2016, I was able to convince the legislature to fully fund treatment courts, felony treatment courts in our state. So we have them in every county.
All right. So when you say Superior Court, that is your general jurisdiction trial
Exactly.
court in the state of New Hampshire. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the felony trial court.
Okay.
Yes.
That's something that, is confusing because in some places it's district courts.
Every
and
state's different.
New
yes.
York, it's the Supreme Court.
Right.
And Michigan, it's the circuit court. So it depends on what
Right.
court you're in. So we want to be clear on that. Now, Judge, you're wearing a hat.
Yes.
That you told me an interesting story about that I'd like to go at.
Well, when I sat in Veterans Court, I talked to the treatment people and all, and we're all aware of the high suicide rate of veterans. So I asked her, what can we do about here in the court? And she said, well, getting to them to talk to us is really the key. And a lot of veterans don't say much. So I said, that's what I'm going to do. I said, I vowed, and I've done it now, I wear this hat so that veterans will say something to me, like, thanks for your service. And then I say back, and I probably have veterans every other day. I've talked to them up to half an hour or so to do that engagement that she said was very important to the suicide rate.
And
so
you were a naval pilot
yes.
with the code name of Ziemian?
I wish it was Z-Man, but it turned out to be Z-Man, yeah.
Okay. And how did you get involved with the drug court movement, Judge?
As I said, I just sort of watched this one judge do such a good job. And then I realized when I was sitting in a different county, I was actually seeing people several times over. And every time someone came to court, the prosecution would say, we're going to give them a chance to go get treatment. And of course, someone who's struggling with substance use disorder, they don't really say, sign me up, march off to the treatment center. Mm-hmm. And then they would come back and ask, okay, we gave them a chance, now we need them to do house time. and jail doesn't change behavior, so then they're back. Now we need them to go to state prison. And I stopped and I said, what about this model is helping us reduce crime, change behavior, or get people back to the community as contributing members? Nothing. So that's how I became involved in the treatment court movement, because it really does do all of those things, and I feel pretty passionate about my work with them.
Cool. Now, the New England Association of Recovery Court Professionals is unique in that it's a multi-state association. It's the only one in the country. How did it start? And I think you might know better, Judge.
Yeah, there was a judge down in Rhode Island that wanted to do this, and he started this and talked to me, and so he started the organization way back, probably, 2001, I think. And so it's such a small area anyway, but it is complicated, I will say that, because the statutory construct in every single state is a little different. But one of the things that we got encouraged to do, and I'm so grateful to Tina about in every other state, is that we have implemented association with police, with the jailers, with all the people, treatment people, probation, obviously. And we have such a comprehensive approach to this. I think we've been complimented by a lot of people.
So, but you essentially started out with it. You didn't feel you had enough population or enough recovery courts in one state, so you decided to do a regional
Well, I think there was a lot of resistance in Massachusetts, so by doing a regional one, I got away with doing it. So it was a regional approach.
Judge, you want to add something on that?
Sure. No, I became involved in the organization, as I said, about 10 years ago, when one of the members, I think it was Alex, asked me to come speak at one of their conferences. I knew nothing about it, and then became more and more involved. And, Bob has been such a great leader and somebody who shows by his model of passion how important it is to be.
We go back a long time.
Yes, to be so collaborative. And so when I was asked to be on the board, I said, yes, sign me up. And to be with a group of people within New England to be able to accomplish the conference that we do is really second to none, I think, maybe second to the national conference, but some people think that it's just as good. So that has been a huge contribution to the treatment court world in New England. Okay,
so New England in some ways has a unique regional identity, and I think that may have helped you guys come together on that. Am I right in thinking that?
I think so, because it's unique, and I hate to even say this, but New York borders New England, and there's always this conflict between New Englanders and New York. So I think it's a natural.
I think it has something to do with baseball, maybe Boston and New York. I don't know.
Yeah, it could. That could be.
Mac would know more than I would on that. All right, you guys put on an annual training, I think in the fall, is that correct?
November, yeah.
In November, and what's involved in that?
Oh my gosh, it's a lot. I mean, from the day after the conference, we start planning for the next conference, and we have a conference planning committee.
Doing a great job.
Yes, and it's a smaller group of us that meet monthly, every month, and we contact NDCI, the All Rise folks, to see if they'll give us some speakers. I think they really like sending speakers to state conferences, regional conferences, to get that word out. And then we also submit a call for proposals, ask people who are interested in coming to our conference and talking about what their unique program is or how they support treatment courts, what do they have to offer. And it's a 2-day conference with, 10 breakout sessions each morning and afternoon, and then we have plenary speakers, national speakers that come. I think you've been doing it for so long, it's built up an incredible reputation, and the people that come speak are really highly motivational speakers. And we find a venue and we work the membership. We usually have about 500 or more people attend.
Yeah, we had about almost 700 last year, at 650 people.
All right, and how did you cope with COVID in that time frame?
Well, we didn't do it in the
We did
2020.
Didn't we do it virtually?
Did you
We
try
took 1
virtually?
year off and then we did it virtually.
Virtually.
Yeah.
All right, and now this year it's going to be live, right?
It was live last year and it will be live this year. Yeah.
And where can you get information about this conference?
You can look at our website, New England Association of Recovery Court Professionals website. It's all over the website, and we try to do a blast to everybody and anybody we know involved in treatment courts to get the save the date out. But yes, go to the website. It's a great website.
Okay, and do you offer other types of trainings beyond the conference?
We have webinars.
We have a webinar subcommittee, so we try to do 4 or 5 webinars per year. And we reach out, we are doing one on incentives, building incentives with Judge Diane Bowl from Texas. And that one's coming up next month. We've done some on cannabis and how to manage cannabis in your treatment courts. We've done one on team building, how do the team work together. And we get, Helen Harberts, Brian Meyer to come. And those are all virtual. But they're, sort of hour and a half long sessions at the lunch hour, and we get a lot of response.
And we have we're lucky because we have with Brown University, they have a grant that requires them to do webinars for all of New England. So it's sort of a natural.
It's perfect for them.
Perfect for them to do it with us. And so it really does work out well. And we've done it for about 3 or 4 or 5 years now already.
How do you deal with the different state laws as you're teaching all your people in the recovery courts?
That's really a great question because there are best practice national standards, and that's what we teach on. And what we say is, you need to look at your own laws. They may conflict with the national standards, but these are evidence-based standards. They've been studied for decades. We know they work in treatment courts, so this is what we're teaching you.
Okay. So that's how you get to deal with that particular issue.
Right.
It's a good
If
answer.
there's some ethical issues, sometimes I will say, make sure you know what your ethical rules are in your state, but here's how you manage team communication.
And one of the ways that we really do this is we break up into what judges, treatment people, and they all from different states, and we discuss it for like 2 hours. And people think that's really great because they get a view of what may come to their state or how their state works differently from other states. So it works out very well.
You were talking about at the conference, the breakout sessions.
Breakout sessions.
Yep.
So I would assume that the treatment courts or the recovery courts in your area, in the region, are funded differently in each state. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that must pose a challenge when you're talking to the different judges in your association.
Yes, I think we focus a lot on if you have a drug court and you want to know how to run it well, we will give you the tools and the training to do that. We don't talk a whole lot about funding unless once in a while we have funders come to our conference and they will do a plenary session and talk about funding.
And if you're talking about funding daily in the courts, in Massachusetts, there's no direct funding. But we've been able to incorporate probation department, police, defense counsel, prosecution, all favorably, and does it in the other states too, as a replacement for, we use their money basically, their resources.
Would you call that the greatest challenge the association has faced, or is there something else that would be a larger challenge for your association?
I think there are a couple of challenges. One, for example, in New Hampshire, we were able to get statewide general funds to support treatment courts. So funding sources is a problem. I think the biggest challenges for treatment courts, especially in New England, because we do have a lot of rural areas, is how do we get housing for the people that are in our treatment courts because they don't all have it, and how do we get transportation because they have to be somewhere every single day to comply with treatment
We've
court.
heard a lot of discussions of the problem of rural treatment courts. And that seems to be a consistent issue around the country, and there's some interesting solutions out there that are not part of this podcast.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What do you think your greatest accomplishments have been?
As an organization?
Yes.
I think the conference has grown and grown and grown and become more and more specialized, and the sessions are really perfectly targeted for the people that want to see them. So that's really improved and solidified over the years. I think that's our biggest strength.
Yeah, and part of that obviously is originally we didn't have the support of the probation commissioner, at least in Massachusetts, and there was a lot of resistance along the way. But that has completely changed. The trial court sends people, probation department, police, jailers, all the things that we put together And it is true, because I was sitting in, and still there's this idea of, we should have people who volunteer, even though the rule is, the high-risk people, the people you really want, high risk, high need, they're not volunteering. You have to force them in. So a lot of that goes into the training that we do for, especially the judges from my perspective, and then from probation and other people along the way.
I'm going to ask you a specific state question. How do you think treatment courts or recovery courts could be improved in your state?
Well, I am excited that our Supreme Court is so supportive of treatment courts, because the chief has recently decided we need to build up our office of treatment court. We have one person. So I think what we need to do in New Hampshire is to look at our mental health court systems as well, because both of them, drug courts and mental health courts, have participants with co-occurring disorders. And we need to figure out ways to manage the mental health courts, since there are no national standards. So I think for New Hampshire, the biggest challenge now is to broaden our statewide office so we can provide more support to the local courts, and then come up with more consistent standards for mental health courts, and do an assessment and evaluation for those treatment courts to see what their needs are. And then in terms of the felony drug court, I think it's always going to be housing and transportation. That's the next.
And what about in Massachusetts?
I think the big problem in Massachusetts always was the suggestion, because so many people, because we have 8 divisions in Massachusetts in the trial court, and so the family court, the district court, the superior court. And so if you have a family, that is a family problem. That's in a family court. And so and then the kids are probably in juvenile court. The father is in criminal court. And so I would like to see a combination where you would take all of those problems probably into one of those courts, and that probably in matrimony, I call it matrimony court, do it all there. But they just, the division, this is, each trial court chief is not willing to do that. So I shouldn't say that, because I'll be in trouble in Massachusetts.
No, that's a good vision. Very good vision.
Okay, well, we'll see how much trouble you get into, shall we? So listen, I want to thank you both for coming to this conversation, and I want to offer you now individually, starting with you, is there anything that you want to share about treatment courts that we haven't asked you about?
Oh, wow, that is a big question. I mean, I think I would say that anyone who's curious about treatment court or doesn't know exactly what it is a way to reduce crime so much better than what we've traditionally done. And it's a way to combine treatment with a criminal justice response so people get their underlying needs met. And it's a way to reduce the costs of how we are handling people in our criminal justice system.
And now I want to turn and ask you, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to share now with our audience?
I think that what's happened, and this is thankful for everyone in New England states and across the country, and you especially in Michigan, that drug courts, we call them drug courts now, the recovery courts, we call them recovery courts, they've become so successful along the way, and we have people that present peer-reviewed research that says they work, and that really has helped in all the states. And the Chief Justice, the last Chief Justice, was very supportive, much more supportive along the way, and now the Chief Justice is very much involved and wants this to succeed in Massachusetts to a higher degree and to expand it. So all of that is terrific.
And with that, I'd like to thank you both for appearing on Justice Speaks.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.